Thank you. Thank you for coming for the screening of Squirrel to the Nuts. When I started thinking about this Festival of Preservation, I thought I would take the concept a little broader, rather than just about restore film. You know, it's more about restoring film, preserving them, preserving the culture of cinema. So our guest tonight and the film have performed a different form of preservation, but just as important. And so this is, James Kenney is the man that found on eBay the director's cut of Peter Bogdanovich's last film. And he's going to tell us that story. James.
Hello? Okay, yes. Hi, good evening. I'm curious, who here has seen She's Funny That Way, the released version of this? Okay, one lonely soul, and I assure you, you haven't seen Squirrels to the Nuts. It's a very different film. Some quick background, which I think is necessary for the full effect of the story. I was born in Staten Island and raised in Staten Island. My dad taught film at Manhattan College in the Bronx, or he taught English, but he taught film appreciation. And so back then you would rent the 16mm prints from Films Incorporated. So as a kid, I was seeing things like The Bandwagon and the Gold Rush, as well as watching the Brady Bunch and things like that. So I was director savvy in a sense, even as a little kid. And when I was 10, my mom passed away, and I was obviously kind of depressed after that. And my dad had the strange but ultimately quite successful idea of taking me to see They All Laughed, Peter Bogdanovich's 1981 film, which is not a kid's film. It's a PG film, but it's not a kid's film. It's if you haven't seen it, it's sort of Laurent in New York, a group of friends falling in and out of love with each other, and Ben Gazzara is in it, and Audrey Hepburn, and John Ritter, among other people. But it was this beautiful sort of poem of a film about New York City, which back when everybody else was making New York City look awful, in films like Dressed to Kill and French Connection, and he made this gorgeous, lovely film that was shot on the streets, in the middle of Times Square. And so at the age of 10, he became my favorite director. And I followed his career ever since. Now what's interesting though, tragically, as some of you may have known, he was dating one of the stars of the film, and her estranged husband killed her before it was released, and killed himself. And Peter went into a funk and never quite recovered, meaning that was his last self-generated project after all those huge hits in the 70s, like What's Up, Doc, and Paper Moon, and great films like Saint Jack and Targets and Last Picture Show. Everything since then that got the green light was, he was a director for hire. There were some great films. He made Mask with Cher, but that wasn't his project. And he made Noises Off, which is another film. Made no money, but people recognize now how excellent it was. But his career was not at the way it was in the 80s now, or the 70s. And now I'm bringing this up because I was a fervent fan. I went to see The Thing Called Love, River Phoenix's last film, alas, that he made. It didn't open in New York until 5 years after it was made, at the Anthology Film Archive, but making me like him forever, Quentin Tarantino was there in the audience by himself, quietly, sitting in a corner. So he's a real movie fan. He went to see it theatrically. And Peter's last film, theatrically, was The Cat's Meow in 2001 with Kirsten Dunst about the Thomas Ince murder. Excellent film that did no business, and so his career, he was doing TV work and writing some excellent books. And then in 2013, it was announced that he was making this film called Squirrels to the Nuts. And it was actually his first self-generated project in 32 years or something like that. It was written by him and Louise Stratton, his ex-wife and still friend. And because it was being shot in New York, I was hearing about it. The New York Post would run photos of Jennifer Aniston on the street, between takes and things like that. So I was very excited about it, and a lot of people seemed kind of excited about it. But then the film sort of disappeared. I didn't hear much about it. And then when you think about destiny sometimes, I'll tell you what a sign of destiny is. I was at my daughter's dance school in Maspeth, Queens, when the nice Chinese lady who sold bootleg DVDs came in. DVDs, $5, and a year before this film ever showed up, she's holding a copy of She's Funny That Way, Peter Bogdanovich, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? So I bought it, and I took it home, and it had Arabic subtitles, but it was, if you'll allow me to be bold, because you were actually involved in the premiere of the film in Vienna, Venice, excuse me. I'll tell you right now, I was befuddled. I was like, what is this film? Because it's not a Peter Bogdanovich film. You know, he's an auteurist. You know how he makes films. He doesn't like scores. The movie was ladled in music. You know, he's a show don't tell kind of guy. Endless narration over all the scenes. And it was cut like a TV movie a lot, like close up, close up. That's not how Peter shoots. He actually cuts in the camera and only shoots what he wants and doesn't shoot masters. And so but nobody was complaining. I mean, Peter didn't say anything. He was doing publicity for the film, and he did a commentary on the DVD.
He came. You know, the producer sent me the film for Venice, and we saw the film, and we invited it because it was so great that Peter was working again, and then he came and he supported the film. I mean, he just said something about that he didn't like that they changed the title, but he never let anyone to know that it was the film had been recut and changed substantially. I think with his approval, I just really wanted the film to,
I mean, we could talk a little. I mean, I don't. There's a lot of. This is my. If you allow me, my website TrembleSightWonder.com. I have a detailed article including him talking about the film, but. The short of it is he was getting his first chance in 13 years. He was 74 years old. He had sued Universal when they changed the score on Mask behind his back and cut some scenes out. And he was right because he had director's cut, but you don't sue studios when you're having a hit generally. That he said it was lawyer's advice, that he was just afraid he wouldn't work again. However, if I may be so bold, the irony was the film that came out was so undistinguished, he never got a chance to make another film. But so I'm sitting here saying there's something wrong here, and I had to accept that maybe he screwed up, but I knew this wasn't his intention. The film just didn't make any sense to me as a Peter Bogdanovich film. So I think I've proven my bona fides as the world's greatest Peter Bogdanovich fan because nobody else cared, right? nobody else was worried about this or thinking about this. And for years, I was checking eBay. I didn't think I was going to find what I found, but I was looking for a screenplay, just something to see the original idea he had. But the modern world isn't like the 1970s. There's no lobby cards. It's everything's digital. There's nothing to sell. So I never found anything, but I mean, I was just sitting there saying, it's mildly depressing that it looks like maybe he was not a director to be working in the 21st century, that, his best time was behind him. And then I guess it was October 2020, and I was supposed to be grading papers. I'm a professor, and I'm on eBay, of course, instead of grading the papers. And I look, and there's a listing that says Sony HD cam videotape. She's Funny That Way, Jennifer Aniston, Owen Wilson. So it didn't even mention Peter Bogdanovich's name, in the listing, but I knew what it was in a sense. But I'm like, well, this is interesting. But it was $150 they were asking, in some sort of format. I don't know what it is, And I'm like, I'm not rich enough to buy this as a paperweight or anything. But I look closely at the tape itself because the listing didn't show anything special about it, other than it was just a industry tape of the film. But I just clicked on the photo and it said "Squirrels to the Nuts" on the tape. But I'm like, well, title changes happen, as you say. But it said the running time was 113 minutes. And She's Funny That Way is 92 minutes or something like that. So I was like, immediately, I'm like, even if this is some screwy work print, that with time stamp on the bottom and the temper, I got to see this, But I still bargained the guy down. I asked him, "I'll give you 100." And he was like, "Okay," So I bought this history-changing piece of film history for $100. I got it converted, and it's HD, pristine quality. Very different film than She's Funny That Way. It's a New York film. I won't give anything away, but you'll recognize within about 1 second this is a New York film. She's Funny That Way, half of it takes place in LA because they did all this reshooting with this one character who was part of the ensemble, now suddenly the main character, and she rants and she goes on and on and on. Among other things, Joanna Lumley, who you might know from Absolutely Fabulous, and Stephen Dorff are in this version. They're not in the version that was released. Quentin Tarantino shows up in the version that was released, but don't worry, he's not in this one. He said they removed him. But it's a Peter Bogdanovich film. The chronology's back. The story makes sense. The jokes pay off. The title's back. The final gag in the movie, which I'm not giving away, but it's a very self-referential gag. I think about Peter a little bit. It's not. It's a completely different ending. Character fates were changed. And whoever re-edited it, I think, didn't like Peter Bogdanovich films very much because the narrator keeps criticizing all the characters. Like, oh, that he really shouldn't have done that. We all know he's a horrible person for doing that. And Peter is much more understanding of the foibles if people mean well. People just screw up in all sorts of ways in his movies, but he lets them get away with it, or he shows empathy, I should say. That's what I want to say.
I think there is an movement in some of the comments, when we were selecting it for, that was like, well, it's a little bit out of his time, and you see, and so I think they try to make it a little bit more like more realistic, which it can be because it's.
I mean, again, if we talk after, but the producer, what they did is they did a quick test screening. They did one test screening in New York City, random test screening, and it got some negative responses. Now, just to be clear, when Last Picture Show was tested, it got terrible responses.
Disaster, yeah.
And Bert Schneider, the producer, said, "Let's find a better audience." Now, that's a good producer. With this one, this is one of these modern cabals, 25 different producers or something. They immediately said, the producer literally said to him, "I know how to make this into a Peter Bogdanovich film." And suddenly he was just trying to hang on while everybody else was giving him advice and recutting it, putting a score on it. I'm not anti-Tarantino. Tarantino shows up for a ridiculous ending in the original, but it's because they had to end with something because they'd cut out the ending he wanted. So Quentin came in as a favor to be kind of a deus ex machina, to show up at the end. But so I found this thing, and it's gorgeous, and it's a great film, and it's a Peter Bogdanovich film through and through. I mean, it's sort of They All Laughed meets What's Up, Doc, if you need to have sort of a frame of reference. And so I'm like, well, what do I do now? I have this movie, So I wrote my friend Bill Tech, who made a documentary about Bogdanovich a few years ago. And 2 days later, I get an email from Peter Bogdanovich, and he's like, "Oh my God, what have you done?" And he's like, because there was no copy on Earth. Just to be clear, this is still the only copy that exists of his cut. That he was pushed out of the editing room or whatever, and he didn't have a copy, and nobody he knew had a copy. And he was like, "This is the best Christmas. It's like a lost child that you thought was dead is returned to you." And so ultimately, it was his fine cut. Just to be clear. I think it might say at the beginning, this is an unfinished film because some of the credits are like, say, TBD, like to be determined, but this was his cut. In fact, he's like, "We got to get this out." And I'm like, "Well, Peter, your credits aren't finished." "I don't care." He was talking that way. And then it led to about a year and a half of friendship. He called me a couple of days after that, and he liked to do impressions. And I was like, "Hello, James, this is Peter Bogdanovich." And I'm like, "Oh, hello. And if you'll allow me, how the fuck did you get your hands on that picture?" That's the first sentence he said, or second sentence he said to me on the phone. And he was just enraptured. And because he did know, as it turns out, how good his film was. He just thought it was lost forever, that there was no existence of it whatsoever. So while it's very sad that he passed this year in January, obviously I think it's him living his last year and a half, having this returned and getting it. He was trying to get it back out. Was a very happy, experience for him, as opposed to just sitting there thinking it was gone forever.
Where did it come from?
Oh well, okay. If you want to know now, that basically the story is you wouldn't believe it except for it's true. Apparently, the production studio that they were doing the post-production in, the reason they're not talking about it very much is somebody apparently smuggled it out. Like there was a storage unit, and it was in a storage unit where somebody didn't pay their bill. And so sure enough, somebody else who does that kind of stuff you see on TV, he bid, and then he put up like carpets and lights and things, and then he's not a film guy, he just threw this tape up there. Yeah?
Been there, haven't.
Okay, well, there you go. And then he didn't really know what it was, but he came to a screening at MoMA. We invited him. The guy was a very nice guy. But it was just literally, it was there. So if any of you wanted to find it, you could have found it. But I'm just saying, I was looking, I was typing, she's funny that way, like once a week for 5 years.
I'm on eBay every day, so I'll look at it.
Well, I snuck in there while you were taking a nap or something. And so ultimately, the film is, this is his version, edited by him and his son-in-law, but we're working together. His son-in-law is a serious editor. He's not just like a family thing. He's got a lot of credits. And but it's just amazing that it's very disturbing, actually, to think about. I think with digital editing especially, it's easier and easier for producers to say, "I know what to do," and start messing with it, because why would you hire Peter Bogdanovich if you're not going to let him make a Peter Bogdanovich movie? You know, hire a TV director if you're going to do sort of a, you know, rom-com or whatever they're trying to. Because really what they cut it into feels kind of like somebody saw Mighty Aphrodite, the Woody Allen film. This film is not Mighty Aphrodite, but She's Funny That Way turns into the story about a call girl who's one of the characters in this film, and it's kind of a Cinderella story, which is not this version. This version has different ending, different fates for the characters. So this is obviously shows Peter Bogdanovich had lost none of his skill in the 21st century. He just didn't have the opportunities, and et cetera and so forth. This is a great director working at full capability. It's not an art film, not that heavy. It's a screwball comedy with slamming doors and this and that, but it's a work of art though because Peter Bogdanovich made it. That's pretty much. Yeah.
Enjoy the film.
You bought it, you've done nothing to what we're seeing.
No.
No, this is exactly his film. I didn't do anything.
And the reason why there is no charge for the ticket is because to authorize the studio that released the original theatrical still controls, you know, some of this they have to authorize it, so they authorize if you do it for free.
Oh, I can tell you exactly why though. It's the music rights issues. Because the film has Frank Sinatra and Tom Petty songs, because he was friends with Tom Petty.
And
they removed them for public domain songs, but kept the music budget. By the way, they pocketed the money that was supposed to go for the music budget. But they're still actually, because this was officially it was this fine cut that they were going to preview. There's a Daft Punk, is that the group?
Yes, Daft Punk.
Like there's a song by Daft Punk that was really, that he wouldn't mind changing. That was just some music they put in the background. But you can't charge money because he didn't get the clearance for the song. So this is officially a preview version. Hopefully, from what I understand, because Lionsgate has agreed officially to release this version eventually, but they've kind of been sitting on it though. But that, you know, they've gotten the Sinatra rights, they've gotten the Tom Petty rights, all the important songs are in there. So eventually it'll come out hopefully like this.
Enjoy it, and James will be here at the end if you have other further questions.